The year is 1596 in Japan. Arima Kihei posts a public challenge. A 13-year-old Miyamoto Musashi accepts the challenge. Durin, Musashi's uncle, shocked by this and doing what he can to call off the challenge because of his nephew's age. Kihei saying that to clear his honor, Musashi needs to apologize. To the day of the duel, Durin is apologizing in Musashi's name. Not affected by this, Musashi attacks with a 6-foot quarterstaff and the duel begins. Kihei, being arrogant and underestimating his opponent, to his demise is thrown to the ground and is hit between his eyes and beaten to death by Miyamoto Musashi, now a fighter with 1 win under his belt. This wouldn't be his last duel. The 13-year-old would continue to duel and in his lifetime, according to history, would battle more than 60 duels and barely be hurt and never defeated. Some of the stories surrounding Miyamoto Musashi sound too good to be true, and some of them probably are. But Musashi didn't just achieve legendary status in today's age because of his fighting skills as a samurai. There's much more to his life and story than fighting. Whenever we read about stories of the past, we have to take some of them with a grain of salt, and maybe accept that everything we read isn't exactly how it happened. And while this is true, I don't think anyone can say that Miyamoto Musashi wasn't an outlier. There are many reasons why he is still talked about today, almost 400 years after his death. He's considered to be one of the, if not the greatest and most famous samurai of Japan. I've read a couple of different statements about his status as a samurai, that he wasn't actually a samurai but a ronin. A ronin is a wandering samurai with no lord or master, and that definition seems to be true. He almost preached about the importance of discipline and self-reliance. In this way, he seemed like he was more of an individualist who enjoyed the life on the road, a true vagabond, traveling Japan and learning about life and fighting on his own. Not just learning about it, but coming up with his own fighting style, Ninjiryu. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing this right. He set out to come up with the perfect fighting style, and came up with Ninjiryu, which can loosely be translated to 2 heavens as 1. The fighting style uses 2 swords, a long and a short sword. Musashi was famous for arriving late to duels. With this, he is described by many to have been dishonorable and disrespectful to his opponents. But it seemed to have been more of a strategy that clearly worked. He didn't just fight physically, but mentally as well. A strategy to stress his opponents, arriving to an angry opponent and smiling at them. A lot of things makes Musashi an outlier, even his appearances. His appearance was wear and tear old clothing, nothing like what most warriors of his status wore. Was this a choice based on strategy or maybe philosophy? Reading about him, he almost seemed like an essentialist or stoic, not being defined by what he wore but how he acted, not concerned with his image or how society perceived him. His most famous duel took place at the remote island of Ganryujima of Funashima. The duel took place on 13th of April 1612 against Sasaki Kojiro. They were said to be bitter rivals at the time. Once again, Musashi arrived late. This is one of the stories that might not be entirely factual. I read a couple of places that on the boat ride to the island he created a wooden sword of an oar. The duel was short-lived, as Musashi made a blow to the head of his opponent. It is said that this was his final battle, and he retired his fighting career after this. He didn't stop creating stories of legend for himself. He would go on to write the Book of 5 Rings, a book of philosophy surrounding martial arts. I listened to it and it's a pretty spectacular piece of writing and principles that definitely can be applied today, whether you're doing martial arts or other things. The book teaches you about the elements of life. It can seem quite little teachings of swordsmanship and martial art. I like to think of some of the principles in the abstract and convert them to whatever applies to your life, or in my case, art. In the book, after a lesson or a chapter, he even says something to the effect of, you should consider these principles as though they were discovered from your own mind, and continually make great efforts to make them a physical part of yourself. A powerful book and mind, for sure. In the Book of 5 Rings, he emphasizes that a warrior should understand other professions as well. He said, become acquainted with every art, all the ways of all professions. And as he traveled through Japan, he would take on different professions like writing, sculpting, painting, and calligraphy. One of my favorite quotes from him is, if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything. And I think this plays into why he did so many different things when he was doing other things than fighting and practicing martial arts. His understanding of life and philosophy expanded, and I'm sure it made him a better warrior because of it. As I said earlier, he almost seemed like a stoic, and I have gathered 7 quotes that to me could have been said by a Roman Stoic 1500 years before him. Accept everything just the way it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Be detached from desire your whole life long. Do not let yourself be guided by the feeling of lust or love. Do not hold on to possessions you no longer need. If you wish to control others, you must first control yourself. Generally speaking, the way of the warrior is a resolute acceptance of death. To me, this definitely sounds like something Marcus Aurelius could have written, which just underlies the importance and the human truths of his statements. I absolutely love reading and learning about people of the past and the lessons they still today are able to give us. Unluckily for us, while the history of Miyamoto Musashi might be a bit blurry, one thing is for sure, he left the Book of 5 Rings behind, which we can learn a great deal from. After a long life of wars and duels, and as he felt like his life was coming to an end, it is said that he retired to a cave where the Book of 5 Rings came to life. Musashi was something like a Japanese Renaissance man, who mastered martial arts and was able to apply his mind toward other professions and philosophy. An incredibly interesting story and a man to read about. It's difficult to go into every detail about him in a short video like this, so I can only recommend picking up the Book of 5 Rings in book form or audio, or read more about him. There are links to my sources in the description. Go explore more about a true master. I'm not a historian, so remember, if I said something that isn't exactly right, on point, or untruthful, feel free to write a comment to correct me so we can get it right. I hope you learned something, or at least felt entertained for a while. Consider subscribing, and thanks for watching.